Bitcoin diamond hands, unfazed. I am a diamond hand. Hopefully you guys are too. I know most people are not. It's hard to be diamond hand. I mean, I get it. You know, when you see your portfolio go down 10, 15, 20, 25%, it sucks, right? It really does. And no one could predict these unpredictable moves by the SEC or Gary or any macro conditions out there, right? But we know what's coming for Bitcoin. We know it's the greatest store of value, the greatest hedge against inflation. All the shenanigans that our governments are doing, including the central banks and Fed, right? And all the price hikes due to inflation, well, they're all solved by Bitcoin. That's why strong hands are not leaving. Headline inflation, overall inflation, went down by 0.9%, which is huge. But what actually went down? Because it still seems like everything is very expensive. Gas still went up. I mean, they're still higher. This is the reason why, if you look at core inflation, why it's still higher than CPI is because it subtracts off energy. Here's the thing. Look at China. China is now considering a broad stimulus package with rate cuts because seems like they have gone too far. Seems like their economy is just not doing as well, right? So this is what we don't want to do in the U.S. We don't want to go too far and needing to print more money with more stimulus, right? It seems like we had enough. I saw this too. Bitcoin, you would think that 2023, has not been a good year, okay? But many people forget that at the beginning of the year, Bitcoin was still at 16,000. Actually, 15,000. That was the low. So this is actually kind of shocking. 48,000 new Bitcoin millionaires. 48,000, almost 50,000 new Bitcoin millionaires created in 2023 alone. Now, how did this person come up with this? Well, if you look at the rich list and you look at addresses, okay, there's a lot. There's about 7 million addresses holding at least 1,000 Bitcoin. Only 2 million over 10,000. Then you have 317,000 that's holding above 100,000. And then you have 70,000 holding above 1 million. And then you only have 5,000 holding above 10 million. Those are the whales, right? But that 1 million address count went up by 50,000 versus 2022 numbers. That's a big jump. So first of all, a lot of people probably took advantage when things were lower, right? But also, mostly I think it's just due to people DCAing. Well, today you have someone that's not really pleased with Gary over what he has been doing. Even beforehand, there were many that does not like what Gary is doing or what he represents and just really killing innovation. So today you have Congressperson out of Ohio, Warren Davidson, said that today I filed the SEC Stabilization Act to restructure the SEC and to #fire Gary Gensler. U.S. capital markets must be protected from a tyrannical chairman, including the current one. It's time for real reform and fire Gary Gensler as chair of SEC. So rather than have the old structure, which is you have a guy on top and all these commissioners, and we have commissioners that disagree with Gary, but it doesn't matter because Gary has the last say, right? So he's like acting like king, basically. Okay, rather than have that structure, let's have a different structure where you have commissioners, you have people, oversight people, that executive director of the SEC would report to. But he would have to have consent, right? I mean, this makes sense. Look at corporations. Even a CEO has to report to a board. The board can remove the CEO at any time. It works in the private sector. Why can't it work with the SEC, right? I think this is a good plan. Yeah, if you look at an inflation rate of Bitcoin, it keeps dropping. But when you look at an inflation rate of dollars or euros, it's quite the opposite. It keeps going upwards, right? So there's a big difference when the inflation rate is coming down versus inflation going upwards, right? So big difference. This is the reason why Bitcoin is different and why so many people are turning to Bitcoin, right? We know BlackRock, they pull a lot of strings behind the scenes. They do a lot of things behind the scenes. So I don't know, this whole thing, this whole weakness that we're seeing with the Fed, with everything else, who knows? Who knows? Maybe BlackRock is behind it all, right? Obviously, the largest asset manager out there. If they want to get into Bitcoin, they want to buy Bitcoin. They want to buy it cheap. They don't want to buy it when it's rallying. They want to buy when everyone else is panicking, right? Kind of like right now, after what happened with the SEC, and then with the Fed, you got Gary and Powell disrupting the U.S. markets and crypto markets a ton. What better time to be loading up on Bitcoin? So I wouldn't put it past them if they were, the ones really pulling the strings behind the scenes. But you know what? We'll see. Or maybe they're not pulling any strings and they just realize, well, due to everything that's going on, right? Despite we had this debt ceiling crisis, then we have this SEC FUD, and then we had, maybe they know, despite all these things, it doesn't really matter, because what really matters is the halving event. And this is the time to be loading up. I mean, if you look at the previous cycles we had, yes, we go through either a year or a year and a half of recovering from bottom. Then we have a year to a year and a half of upward trending moves until we hit a peak. So maybe BlackRock just realizes, well, this is the way. So we need to get in before this next top happens, right? So if you look at where we are now, pretty obvious. We're about halfway through the 532 days, right? Leading up to the halving event. And then, like always, we have our tremendous run afterwards. So no different this time around. Well, we got developments happening too. Innovations that's happening, right? Strike, which utilizes Lightning Network. Well, now they're offering remittance to Mexico. So now you could send money to Mexico basically for free. It's almost feeless. Okay, you use Western Union, you use whatever other payment. It's like $20, $100, whatever it may be. You use Strike app. You could utilize Bitcoin's Lightning Network to send money basically worldwide. I'm low on energy. This is my fifth stream today. No, fourth. Yeah. So a little tired. Also a little tired of this guy right here. Whatever. I think a lot of you guys tuned in, right? A lot of you guys tuned in, listened to what was said. There's just something fishy about this whole thing, all right? We knew ahead of time that Powell was not going to raise rates this time, right? There was going to be a pause. And I think he knew that. And I think the other Fed presidents and governors knew that. So they had to upset the market in some way. So rather than just say, okay, we're pausing and evaluating, they released this poll. Somehow there was a poll conducted ahead of time, and every single person on that poll decided that, yeah, the Fed fund rate needed to be higher by the end of the year. Okay, how much higher? Well, 0.5% higher to be exact. And if you look at Bitcoin's chart, it's even more crazy than this, but this is just looking at S&P 500. Yes, there's dips. Yes, there's scary times when the whole thing seems like it's going to collapse. But then when you zoom out, you realize, well, you hold on DCA, you're going to get rewarded. And this goes all the way back to 2009 when there was a really, really big crash, right? Coming off of the housing bubble. But since then, it's recovered nicely and just kept going and going and going and going. Even a 2020 crash is barely noticeable, right? So, just goes to show you, you wanna have patience, you wanna hold and DCA. That's really it. When you zoom out, you realize that that is the way. You don't need to do anything fancy. You don't need to do advanced trading. All you have to do is HODL and DCA. That's really it, right? So it's the same thing with Bitcoin. When in doubt, zoom out. If you don't believe what's going on, I mean, this doesn't even go back far enough, but I mean, this goes back to 2015, and let's just keep in mind, 2015, it was $100, okay? $100 to $25,000. Yes, I have a lot of lines drawn over here, but you get the picture. You know, when in doubt, zoom out. There's a lot of big, scary dips, but coming from someone that has lived through all of these, basically, during the times, they always seem very scary, but afterwards, you just forget about it. Like, you know, it doesn't even register in your head. Life moves on. Bitcoin moves on.